the longer you train, you create a point of diminishing returns, that the more and more sets probably gives you less and less and less actual return on your investment.
It's that time again to get my blood work done to see where my numbers are. Again, the one big thing for me is I'm keeping track of it. It's so precise. You know, I competed in bodybuilding and powerlifting and martial arts, but that was all over decades ago. And so how can I continue to keep this physique and be this strong at this stage? And so that is by optimizing my health with Titan Medical. It all stems from one thing: your blood work, what's going on inside of you. And that's the main thing that I'm focused about, is see how I can continue to not just be in the game. I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be a weekend warrior. I don't want to say you got a dad bod. I want to be the pinnacle of the health and fitness industry decades after I competed. And I've always said this too. You got so many of these guys that were with me in the 80s and 90s, and they keep putting the pictures up from the 80s and 90s. I don't want to be that guy. I like the fact that I can still put up pictures of me today, even though I won the universe back in the 90s. That's the goal for me. I don't know what your goal is, but I can tell you this. I know you want to live, and I know you want to live your best life. And that starts with blood work. Over at Titan Medical, start today.
One of the big things that we did, this training plan, your suggestions to me was, instead of adding in cardio at a certain point, it was more that you wanted me to go back for a second workout. Yeah. And I loved that. What was why that instead of me doing the one?
Now we're talking about the top 1%, which is where you're at.
I would like to keep it on the 1% today, because of the fact that I want them to, if they want to be a Stan, they have to be a 1%er.
Yeah.
And my belief is I would like everybody to try to be that. Yeah. Even if you can't become that, at least attempt, have that fight to try to do it.
Quick disclaimer for the vast majority of the population, your Gen Pop. The interference effect doesn't seem to be that significant if you do both lifting and cardio. As you get further and further and further into that 1%, and if your goal is the best marathon time, you better be careful how much muscle mass you put on. And if your goal is bodybuilding, holding the most mass, you got to be careful how much cardio you do, because they compete with each other. They can contribute to each other, but at some point, the difference between a marathoner and a powerlifter or a bodybuilder, this kind of becomes a tug of war at the extremes.
Right.
And so my recommendation is, a lot of people will do cardio for fat burning, which I've also suggested is kind of a zero-sum game for some people, because it adversely affects non-exercise activity. It seems to be, we call the constrained energy model, where the more cardio you do, the more you compensate later by overeating or moving less, sitting more and eating more in terms of non-exercise activity. Now, of course, there's a threshold at which that becomes more and more counterproductive, and some cardio is great. But when I'm working with an athlete, like with Nadia Wyatt for the Miss Olympia, she took 3rd place in the Miss Olympia, all she did was 3 or 4 10-minute walks a day after meals, and that was primarily for digestion. It wasn't necessarily for burning calories, but we trained twice a day. And you can burn a ton of calories in a training session, particularly pre-contest, when we generally tend to shorten our rest periods a little bit and increase our volume a little bit. May or may not be necessary, but it's just more workload. So you do have an increased energy expenditure, but the specific stimulus is lean mass retention or hypertrophy, if possible, at that late stage in a calorie deficit.
With all the side effects
it's certainly not optimal.
Right.
I've learned a lot over the 4 decades of health and fitness and being in the trenches with the greatest in the world. And one of those things I've learned a lot more about and how to build better muscle is nutrition and how it has changed over the decades. And that's why I have the Titan meal plan for you guys out there that are confused about nutrition. I'm gonna set you straight. Get a hold of me today. The link will be in the comments down below for you guys. Everybody, get over to the Titan meal plan, and I'll see you in the Titan crew, where I will fine tune any difficulties that you're having.
I've done this with a lot of athletes. It's rather than doing an extended amount of cardio, I'll just split their body parts, chest in the morning, shoulders and triceps at night, quads in the morning, hamstrings at night, back in the morning, biceps at night. So to get in for 2 sessions, it also allows me to shorten the sessions, a little more intensity over a brief period of time, because there seems to be, in terms of DOMs or recovery ability, the longer you train, you create a point of diminishing returns, that the more and more sets probably gives you less and less and less actual return on your investment, as opposed to the intensity of those first number of sets. You're in a calorie deficit and probably have started to have to drop your carbs a little too. I try and keep them as high as possible, as long as possible, to stimulate those anaerobic sessions. But if that's the case, your volume suffers in the training session. And it's okay if volume can suffer, but intensity should not, meaning that you should be able to lift, or attempt to lift, as close to as heavy as you were lifting when you were at your biggest and strongest. You try and, as close as you can, try and hold the load and then the proximity to failure. That becomes more, so maybe you used to be able to do 8 sets for chest, and that might be 2 or 3 different exercises in a given workout, carved up in the off season, or even 10 or 12 in a given workout. And then as you get carb depleted and calorie depleted, and your body fat comes down, you get closer and closer to competition, and you're starting to feel some fatigue, maybe you can only do 4 sets or 5 max. And that's all you have the energy for, but those 4 or 5 sets should have the same level of intensity, hopefully nearly the load, so within a rep or 2 of failure, in order to give the muscles a sufficient stimulus to tell them, hey, don't go anywhere, I need you.
Right.
Because typically in that calorie deficit, your body's going to start chewing up muscle. And so that's the whole concept behind, or the science behind.
So we just finished one movie. It turned out great. I am loving it. I love the dailies that we see. On to the next project. You finish, you keep going, you keep trying to go. That's, I guess, a better way to say it. And this next movie that I have booked, this is going to take all of me. This is going to take slice to the bone, all the character development, but also I need to be able to move and grow and keep that strength through this process. You'll understand why that is after you see the movie, but keeping the strength is key when you're dieting. And so I'm going to show you how to do that on Power Bodybuilding. You guys have a great day, and I'll see you over there.
The mind approach of not running away and doing like, for triceps, I'm just doing push downs now. No more close grips.
Yeah.
I'm dieting. I'm not worried about the strength.
Yeah.
That's such a mental approach for you and I that we believe in. Keep that foundation work, those exercises that makes you mentally go, I need to retain some of this. Now that's a little interesting concept, because that's something you truly believe in. Is it's not true? Just go to the basic machines, go go away from that hard stuff.
I don't know. I used to have the philosophy when I was a younger man that the free weights were better. And one of my reasonings for that was I worked with a lot of athletes in college, and I presumed, or I suggested at the time, or just flat said, that it provides you a balance benefit, which might transfer over. But in fact, it's just force production in the gym. Whether you're doing a squat or doing a Smith machine squat has no difference in terms of performance. They're 2 different things. Or a leg press or a hack squat for that matter. All you're doing is increasing force production, right? Just foundational strength. And then you go do your sport to get your balance and coordination, sport specific, all of that. You don't do it in the gym. And because if I was to continue to believe that the squat was better for sport because it had a balance component and et cetera, then that's a slippery slope into this functional that we've been going through for the last few years, where next thing you know, you're crawling around on the floor and spinning around on a Bosu ball because it has some sort of sports specific effect.
Right.
It's functional.
Right.
And that's all bullshit. So really what you want to do in the gym is just train, whether it's building up force production it can be in the specific direction, speed, and velocity of your sport, or for the muscles that are going to be utilized, but you don't. It's like you don't shoot free throws with a 100-pound basketball and think that that's going to improve your sport. That's the point. We used to put heavy weights on a bat, thinking it would improve.
Yeah.
Turns out it actually slowed you down. That's a whole different conversation about speed and having to train within at a certain pace, meters per second, in order to get a speed benefit. I'm trailing off, but
it's good.
Weightlifting is a very
It's good
specific stimulus.
Right. But in the long run, you like the free weights for you, not for them.
I did.
For you.
And now as
What
I've gotten
switched it?
older,
What switched?
aches and pains, like with the bench press, what this arm does, this arm has to do. And if you've got a little shoulder issue,
Right.
dumbbells might allow you to adjust this elbow where it doesn't hurt. You get some independent movement.